Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, welcome to the second class of week 4. We began this week with an introduction to various elements of literature, especially elements of poetry. This is going to be a continuation of the discussion that we have had. So, before we proceed, let us have a quick recap of what we did in the previous class. We discussed the importance of a figure of speech, and we brought out parallels between a rhetoric device and a figure of speech. What we call a rhetoric device becomes a figure of speech in poetry, and how, whether it is a rhetorical device or a figure of speech, there is a kind of a deviation from the ordinary use of words here, and because of this deviation it adds novelty to be it speech or poetry, as well as it increases the impact on the reader or the listener. Well, therefore, you can broadly call it a kind of a figurative language, not a non-literal language or a figurative language. We also discussed how when used in writing or when used in speaking, these devices enhance the beauty of writing and speaking activity, and how it takes language to a level deeper than the superficial meaning, So, it takes language to a degree deeper and makes it makes it work wonders. In fact, as a result of this, it is going to leave the reader with a sense of awe. In other words, it is a device that is used to create a sense of wonder in the readers and the listener. So, here these figures of speeches, they not only reveal the writer's interests and the intent, they are also used to create some kind of a deliberate impact in such a way that readers and listeners are left with a sense of mesmerizing. These devices, they mesmerize the readers and the listeners. As part of that, as part of our understanding of figures of speech, we discussed various sound devices such as alliteration, assonance, consonance, onomatopoeia. We discussed figures of speech such as simile, metaphor, personification and all that. So, in this class we are going to further our understanding of these figures of speech. And as I said, there are more than 250 figures of speech, and obviously for want of time and space we will not be covering all of them. These are some of the predominant figures of speech that you come across in various literary pieces. So, today's class we are going to begin with a discussion of metonymy. Please pay attention to this particular figure of speech. It is again a very important figure of speech. Metonymy again has a Greek origin, Greek root, which means a kind of a changing of name, a change of name, you can call it a change of name. So, what happens here, we are going to replace, when we use it, we replace an idea or a subject by another idea or a subject or a thing which has close relationship with what we are discussing. So, let us say for instance I want to discuss A. So, rather than directly jumping into discussing A, I make use of Y, which has some kind of parallels between A, which shares some kind of relationship between X, and then make use of it, something like this. So, metonymy. So, again, why do we do it? Because literature, creates some kind of, rather than approaching a subject directly, it creates some kind of a gap in our understanding. It's a deliberate gap that's created so that, that gap can act as creating a fresh perspective. That's the reason why, as I said, all these figures of speech, they enhance the impact. No doubt when you use them, you're going to create an extraordinary impact on your listeners or readers. And usually metonymy is used abundantly in many of idioms and phrases, So when you say head count, for instance, it's a very interesting idiom, head count, do the head count. What do you mean by that? It's not just the head you count. The head here stands for, an entire person, something like this, Or when you say from the cradle to the grave, human journey is between from cradle to the grave. You can describe human life as a kind of a journey from cradle to the grave. What do we mean by that? Here cradle symbolizes birth and grave symbolizes, death. So birth and death are replaced by, cradle and grave. So this is an apt example for metonymy, we have some well-known sayings in English. You must have heard of this statement, the pen is mightier than the sword. So here the keywords are pen, mightier and sword. Obviously, when you use it, you do not mean literally. That's why I said most of these figures are figures of speeches. They deal with a figurative language, That's why it's called a figure of speech, figurative dimension of a language. So pen is not a pen here. Pen stands for an intellectual activity, writing, language. Sword may stand for physical power. So always the intellectual powers are better than, let's say, physical power, something like that, in order to, it has multiple meanings, but in order to convey something similar, we use pen and sword, Again, this is a part of a symbolic use of language, And when you say the bench delivered the verdict, so when you hear of a judge pronouncing judgment, we say the bench gave the verdict, delivered the verdict. Here the bench stands for, judge. So this is how bench comes to replace judge, but meaning is enhanced in the process. Meaning is enhanced. Metonymy. Here one object or one thing replaces another. We have another similar figure of speech called synecdoche, So it is slightly related to metonymy, but there is a minor variation. So we should not get confused here. Even in synecdoche, there is a replacement, but here rather than any object replacing any other object, here a part of the object replaces the whole object, a part of it. Let us say, for instance, in the previous example we gave head count, right. So head is a part of human being. When we use head count, what we mean is count the number of people involved. So therefore head count is a better example in synecdoche. So where the head, a part of human being, stands for the entire human being, right. So something like this. And why do we use it? Again, it's a part of symbolism, it's a part of symbolic expression of language. They help writers bring in variations, ultimately poetry is to break free from the mundane, it's to break free from the routine, to break ourselves free from the tyranny of the mundane. Poetry can also be defined as that, it's a letting loose of the tyranny and embracing something new. So all these expressions help poetry achieve that effect. When you use greybeard, for instance, here again beard, greybeard stands for an old person, a part of him replaces the old person. Therefore, instead of saying an old man or an old person, you can say grey beard. And similarly for the crown stands for the king or the queen, monarchy. It represents monarchy. So here is an extraordinary example from Shakespeare's Julius and Caesar, and I am sure you must have at least heard this dialogue. If not read the entire play, you must have at least come across these particular lines. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears, I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. So, if you are interested in developing oratorial skills or public speaking, many of us who do this job, we make use of this particular play, a scene from this particular play, and use these particular lines. It's an interesting play, you can read this here. Lend me your ears. Your ears is, it's not that he's asking the audience to give him their ears. Here ears stands for entire attention. I want your attention, I want you to listen to me. So, a part, ears represent the entire human being. So, these are some well known examples. I am sure these examples help you understand the concept better, a little better. Yeah, as I said, easily we can there is a scope for mistaking metonymy for synecdoche or the other way around, but though there is one thing is common, that here one thing replaces the other, but in metonymy it's not a part replacing the whole, it's one object replacing another object, a linked, there is a link. But in synecdoche, a part replaces the whole, a part replaces the whole, like the head stands for human being, greybeard stands for the old person. So, a part replaces the whole. That is a crucial distinction that you have to keep in mind when using metonymy and synecdoche. From these two things, let us move on to euphemism. Euphemism is another rhetoric device, and of course also used in poetry and becomes a figure of speech. Here euphemism, again it has Greek origin. In Greek, EU as a root word stands for good, therefore you can even think of eulogy, speaking something good, eulogizing, EULOGY, or you can even consider eugenics, EU stands for good. So, euphemism is stating an unpleasant thing in a very pleasant way. Most of the times it becomes important because remember, words have the capacity to hurt us. Like words have the capacity to heal us, words also have the capacity to hurt us. Therefore, the challenge for the speaker, the challenge for the writer is how to express a sentiment without using a harsher word. That is where we make use of a euphemism, thereby it reduces harshness in tone, but maintains some sort of truthfulness nevertheless. So, while being truthful, you are not being blunt. In euphemism, you are truthful, you say whatever you wish to say, but you are not blunt. Instead, you express an unpleasant thing in a very pleasant way. That is where you can make use of euphemism. So, generally euphemism is employed in order to discuss taboo topics that are generally not discussed, or even to infuse an element of humor, you make use of euphemism. Now, look at this. In order to say that somebody is in jail, you can say he or she is behind the bars. Behind the bars, to a certain extent, is capable of masking a harsher reality called jail. So, when you do not want your readers or listeners to completely get immersed into the harsher tonality of the word, that is when you and I make use of euphemism and say behind the bars, slightly a pleasant way, when your intention is to put it that. Or when you say, your pet breathed its last. So, it is again a euphemism for you lost your pet died. So, another example in poetry, if I can read this: if I pass during some nocturnal blackness, mothy and warm, when the hedgehog travels furtively over the lawn. Look at the expression, when I pass during some nocturnal blackness. Death here is represented as nocturnal blackness, and the idea of somebody dying becomes, when I pass during some nocturnal blackness. How the idea of death and euphemism, like metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, as I said, helps you to bring in some kind of a distance, an intended distance, so that when you understand its meaning, it comes after a pause and has the capacity to give you a kind of a revelation. So, these are some kind of poetic devices writers use to bring in various effects. So, depending on what effect, what impact you want to create, you make use of these devices. Then comes hyperbole. Hyperbole is a very interesting figure of speech. Simply put, hyperbole is an exaggeration to the core, an overstatement. There is a word called exaggeration, but it is exaggeration taken to the power of n. Hyperbole you can call exaggeration taken to the power of n, right. So, you exaggerate a fact so much, and this figure of speech is so common that you and I keep using it when we haven't met a friend in many years. We say, oh, we haven't met in ages, it's been ages since we last met. What we mean is it's been quite a long time. So, without knowing it, when we use it, we will have used hyperbole, a very beautiful, interesting figure of speech that writers use. And when used in advertisements, usually they are also used in advertisements in order to create a kind of a solid impact. Now, when Coca-Cola says, when you open the bottle of a Coke, it says you would be opening happiness. Now, look at this, when you open a bottle of Coke, it's like opening happiness, something like that. Again, an exaggeration, or too much of an exaggeration, a hyperbole, a perfect use of hyperbole. Or when you have watched a Red Bull advertisement, it says, when you consume it, when you drink it, it gives you wings. To connote the sense of liberation a consumer feels after drinking it, you say it gives you wings. All these are overstatements, exaggerations. And Disneyland, if you have been to Disneyland or if you have heard of Disneyland, this is the tagline. The tagline says, the happiest place on earth. The happiest place on earth. Obviously, these are exercises in hyperbole. So, I have a very interesting poetic use. These are not exhaustive, these are just illustrative. We must always keep this point in mind whenever we are listening to these lectures. An 100 years should go to praise thine eyes and on thy forehead gaze. So, he says to his beloved, and the poetic persona to his coy mistress, the poet says, when referring to his beloved, he says, probably I might need 100 years in order to praise you. I might need 100 years to praise you. Probably the highest compliment you could give to your beloved, right? 100 years. Or even when you say 100 years of solitude, I am sure you must have come across that extraordinary piece of fiction, Marquez, 100 years of solitude. Again, hyperbole. Yeah. from hyperbole, let us go to antimetaboly. It is called an antimetaboly. Here what happens is there is a set of clauses or phrases, and they have some kind of parallel constructions here. Here you have two sets of phrases or two sets of clauses, right. So, but the second set reverses, there is a kind of a reversal of the pattern in the second set, thereby you are going to add an extra layer of meaning here. You are going to add an extra layer of meaning, So, in a sense, you are going to create a kind of a balance by, by saying something different in the second part, you create some kind of a balance, you create, balance when you reverse. When you reverse the order, as I said, you create a sort of a balance. Now, look at these examples. I am sure when you look at these examples, it becomes clear. Antimetaboly. We shape our building, and afterwards our buildings shape us. Now, look at a kind of a climatic kind of a change. It's an extraordinary reversal. When you reverse the phrasings here, we shape our buildings, initially we shape our buildings, and later our buildings shape us. Almost a clever play on the word, a clever play on the word. Of course, we are going to discuss a play on the word. When we say play on the word, of course, the first thing that comes to our mind is a pun. A pun is also a clever play on a particular word. An antimetaboly is a play on a set of words, you can call them a set of words or phrases, right. Yeah, power does not add glory to people, it is people who add glory to power. Most of us, many people think that the moment they occupy a chair, the chair dictates what they need to do, but in the hands of better people, the chair gets the character of these people. It is not the chair changing a being, human being, it is a human being changing the character of the chair. Again, when we say chair, it is I am sure you must have recognized the figure of speech we have used. The chair here stands for a position of power, metonymy, right. We discussed it just a while ago. So, this is how a clever reversal of phrases creates a dramatic impact. I know what I like, but I like what I know all the more. Look at this clever know and like, when reversed, what kind of an impact they are going to create here. Yeah, antithesis or an antithesis, antithesis is what happens, two contradictory ideas, two contradictory phrases are put next to each other. In other words, it is a juxtaposition of one idea with another idea which is almost opposite to it, symmetrically opposite, something like that. Okay? A contrasting idea put together so as to again create balance, some kind of a balance here. Now, I am sure you must have again read it or heard it somewhere, Neil Armstrong's description of the space voyage, the voyage. So, there is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. This step that you are keeping on the moon or going out of the, it is like a giant leap for mankind. One small step for man, a giant leap for mankind. Small step and giant leap put together to create a kind of an extraordinary dramatic impact. And now look at another one. It is a very well known statement by Martin Luther King. We must learn to live together or perish together as fools. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. Though brothers and fools are not opposites here, but in a sense they can create that, because brothers stands for, generally symbolize kind of living harmoniously with each other. Fools, foolish in the sense not very harmoniously, but the main contradiction comes here between live together and perish together, live and perish. Look at the dramatic change of the meaning. And another well known thing is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Probably it's a Miltonic statement, better to rule in heaven than serve in heaven, better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Of course, that's a debatable thing. I am not endorsing that opinion, I am just using it only, of course, to make us understand the concept of antithesis. All right. So, these are some examples. I am sure these constructions, you need to focus a little more on these constructions so that you understand intuitively what these figures of speech are. From all these things, we move on to some more important figures of speech. These are paradox and oxymoron. We need to pay careful attention to how oxymoron is pronounced. Oxymoron, it's not moron, oxymoron. The stress is on mo part. Okay. A paradox is again a statement in which first part appears to contradict itself. First part appears to contradict itself. I can give you a very famous story for this. Imagine a huge stone tablet, hanging in mid-air, defying gravity. That itself is a great wonder, right? If there is an object that defies gravity and hangs somewhere in mid-air. So, on the one side of it, when you come face to face with it, it says whatever that is written on the other side is true. And when you go to the other side and see, there it says, whatever that is written on the other side is false. Now you begin scratching your head. This side says what is written on the other side is true, and the other side says what is written on this side is false. What is it doing? It's trying to, one side is trying to contradict the other side. So, the crux of it can be called a paradox. I mean, this entire combination is powered by paradox. Of course, what do you mean by that? That's this particular story or an image that I gave you plays a very important role in Greek culture. So, if time permits, we can take it up at some other stage and ask you what exactly you understand by that. So, but that's an example for a paradox. A well known example for paradox is a statement from or a line from George Orwell's iconoclastic novel called Animal Farm. So, if time permits, please read that short novel. It's a novella. We might discuss it during our discussion of fiction, during our class on fiction. Please read it if time permits. So, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than the others. Well, it should confuse us, right? Because on the one hand you say everybody is equal, and on the other hand you say some are more equal than others. So, how does it flies in the face of the first statement, and it confounds us, it confounds us. But sometimes these kind of contradictions are a part of life. Because see, contradiction, well, in logic it may not be appropriate, but in life contradiction is a part of understanding life, coming to terms with a diversity and multitude of life. That is why when somebody tells Walt Whitman, he is a renowned transcendentalist, American poet who has had a significant influence on poets and writers the world over. Somebody tells him that you contradict yourself, then he seemed to have said, well, I am large, I contain multitudes. So, probably the path to multitude has to go through contradiction, we do not know, but again contradiction may not be an ideal way in communication, but in life that is essential to understand the diversity of life, the paradoxes of life and things like that. Right. And another important thing that Gandhi says, whatever you do in life will be insignificant nevertheless it is important that you do it. Insignificant and important. If everything I do is insignificant, why should I do it? Why should it be important that I do it? Well, probably when you realize that we need to build our own purposes in life. Life as such existentially may not give us any purpose, because when we are created, when we are born here, it is not that, well, if we are not fatalistic, then we can say there is no purpose defined. Every human being has to chalk out his or her own path. So, in order to explain that, probably Gandhi uses this paradoxical statement, so these are some very important figures of speech. We might have one or two more. Let us take a look at it. Irony. Again, irony is an important thing, and without you and I knowing that we are using irony, we keep using it. Irony can be attained in very many ways. Irony is there when you, it's a verbal irony, situational irony. There are different examples to that. So, when you say in an example, now look at this. Oh, I love spending big bucks, said my dad, a notorious penny pincher. Somebody who is miserly says that they love spending big bucks. What could be more ironic than that? So, this you can call it a verbal irony, irony achieved using words to convey the meaning. Irony, of course, is to convey, you use a word in order to convey meaning which is opposite to the word you use, which is opposite to the word that you use, something like that. If a word means X, well, you have used that word in order to convey Y, which is an opposite of X, right. So, something like this. And now, if it is a thunderstorm, if you are caught in the middle of a thunderstorm, if you say, oh, what a beautiful and pleasant weather we have here today, that means it is a situational irony. Well, you are trying to say an unpleasant thing, but you are trying to express it in a pleasant way. It is not euphemism, but it is irony because you are not exactly enjoying the weather. You are sarcastic, you are ironically you are using it. It is called a situational irony. From irony we come to pun. A pun is a very important thing. It is a play on the word. It is a play on the word. Here, a pun makes use of multiple meanings associated with a particular word. Multiple meanings associated with a particular word. So, therefore, you say pun intended. When you want to convey that what you say has multiple meanings attached to it, you say pun is intended. So, it is, this pun is again it can be based on similar spelling, or it can be based on especially in writing it is based on a similar spelling. When you say it, it is based on the way you sound these things. Now, look at this example. The tallest building in the town is the library. It has thousands of stories. So, thousands of stories. Stories is, spelling is different, but if you can replace stories with story, S-T-O-R-E-Y, so multiple floors, building has multiple floors, for that story we use of it. But since it is a library, it also has stories, multiple stories, thousands of stories, a pun on that. That means it is true that this library has plenty of stories, and it also has plenty of stories, something like that, architecturally speaking. And again, the other one is, I used to be a banker, but I lost interest. Now, look at the use of the word interest. Interest here can mean two things. One, the interest that you earn on money, and the other is losing interest in something. So, we do not know which he means, probably both. So, this is a classic case of pun. So, I am sure all these things have given you an idea about how figures of speech are used. So, what I am going to give you, I am going to give you an extraordinary poem. So, let us see if you have based on your understanding of figures of speech that we have discussed in these two classes, if you can identify at least a few of them. This is an extraordinary poem by Bunner called The Heart of the Tree. For want of time, I will not be able to read this entire poem, but what you can do, you can take a screenshot of it. I am sure you should be able to identify at least 8 to 10 figures of speech that we have discussed in the class. Metaphor, yes. Alliteration, yes. Consonants, yes. Assonance, yes. Personification, yes. Metonymy, yes. Synecdoche, probably. Just think of it. So, there are different figures of speech employed, at least you should be able to spot 8 to 10 of them. A beautiful, remarkable poem. If you want to inspire somebody to, towards nature, if you want to inspire somebody to lean towards nature, or if you want to encourage them for, you can give them this poem, The Heart of the Tree. What does he plant when he plants a tree? What does he plant when he plants a tree? He plants a friend of sun and sky. Now look at this. When you plant a tree, you plant a friend of sun and sky. So a tree is called a friend to the sun and sky. And again, the heart of the tree. What is the figure of speech used in the title itself? An extraordinary, remarkable poem. Please read it and identify it. Okay. Thank you.